Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I've got the January 2018 10 cards 1 kit video. So I'm just showing you here quickly how it is that I split up my cardstock. I take all 5 pieces and I split them lengthways at 4 1/4 and then fold them in half with my bone folder. So I'm jumping in with card 1 here. And what I've done is taken one of the cutter parts, cut it from the rest, and then using some double-sided sellotape, I've attached it onto the mirror board. Now, double-sided sellotape on mirror board isn't particularly forgiving, so I've sort of made little tabs so that I could position it with a little bit more care. And then I've foam mounted on the back of the panel of the mirror card there and put it into the middle of a cream card base. Now, please excuse my head, but I just need to make sure that everything is centralised, if you like. I've popped a few stars over the larger stars on the front of the panel, and then using the gems I've sort of created a little pattern around the outside, on the cream. I use my craft knife to pick them up. They're very different things that can be used, but that I find easiest. And then I've used my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen just to go over the word star, and then glossy accents, which I've just decanted into a fine nozzled bottle, and I've gone over the top of the sparkle, and that's the first card. So really simple to start us off with. And here's card 2. Now this card is using some of the green patterned paper from the kit and a grey card base, and all I do is use my pencil to mark off where it is that I want to cut. And this is me just showing that I don't always have to use scissors to not make loads of waste. I'm very careful with my trimmer. Here I've taped the green onto the front of the card base where it's going to be positioned, and then using the lines on my grid mat I've made sure that my circle is towards the top and in the centre, and I've cut through both the card base and the pattern paper, taking it away, and then using a glue dot I have attached my little bear charm at the top on the front of the card base, and then using foam tape I've just mounted it all up all over the back, and then I'm folding a piece of ribbon into the foam tape for sticky, if you like, and then trimming that off, removing all the rest of the backing, and then making sure that the bear is hanging down. I've attached that onto the front. Now I've taken one of the stickers from the sticker set that comes in the kit, and I'm using my EK Success powder tool just to neutralise all the sticky on the back, because I wanted to foam mount it up and I didn't want it in the post to get squished and then for it to stick. And then I was just using my tweezers so that my fingers are out of the way. I position that over the ribbon, and that's card 2. So a really simple card, but I do love that little charm. I think it's really cute. And now on to card 3. So this is using one of the vellum pieces here, and what I've done is I've cut it out, and then using some greaseproof paper, because I couldn't find my vellum, so I had to run to the kitchen, I've traced out using the actual cutter part, because I didn't want to scratch the silver foiling on the vellum. I've traced around the cloud, and then I've cut a piece of the white cardstock to be the same size as the vellum, and then I've laid my tracing where the bubble will go, the little thought bubble, and I'm just using some washi tape. Now be warned, washi tape doesn't like sticking to greaseproof, so you do have to sort of use a bit of care with this if you're going to try and adopt or mimic this card. And then using my craft knife I cut through both the greaseproof paper and the white cardstock around that cloud image, because I want to make a shaker card. Now here I'm just using my little mini Xyron, and I burnish the vellum piece. Now with hindsight I could have put the greaseproof piece behind that little speech bubble to stop it from catching the stick, but this way works just as well. I attach it onto the white card, and then using my EK Success I take all the stick off the back of the speech bubble that the Xyron has put on there, if you like. So it did take quite a lot, but it did the job. And then using my foam tape I folded it in half, and then I cut it lengthways into 3 narrow strips. And here I've picked a sentiment out which says dream big little one, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which on vellum won't dry as it's a pigment ink, so I did have to heat set it with some clear embossing powder, and then I've run my thin foam strips all around the outside, and also to create a little well, if you like, around that cloud. Then I've popped a few sequins onto the card front so that I could position my piece on top. I've tied a little ribbon around the bottom and just put a knot because a bow I think would have been too big. And then using the Nuvo drops from the kit, I've just put a little spray going from the top left corner down to the bottom right, just to add a little bit more orange to match the little pussycat there. Okay, card 4. And this card, I'm using the ABC patterned paper and a blue card base, and it's the width of the card but slightly shorter at the top and at the bottom. I just use my pencil to mark out where I want to cut and my T-square ruler, and then I'm back to my scissors. I don't really stick to scissors or trimmer, or which trimmer as well. I've got quite a few. It depends whichever one's closest to hand. And then I've taken one of the stickers from the sticker sheet that matches the patterned paper, and then I've stuck it onto the yellow striped patterned paper, and then I trim that down to be the right size. And then I've run some of the green peel-offs just around the edge, just to give it a little bit of pop on the edge. Put some foam tape onto the back, and then I mount it onto the patterned paper towards the top. Please excuse my head, sorry. I am using the lines on my grid mat to make sure that it's nice and straight, because there's a lot of lines on this card, so it would really show if it wasn't straight. I've popped a few more peel-offs along the short sides of the strip as well, and here I'm just using my glossy accents to adhere some of the wood veneer pieces into the photo frame spaces, and I'm picking out the word party, the letters from the sticker sheet. I use them on my ruler. Now on the ruler it's really helpful because there's so much sticky left that you can just transfer them straight over, but I actually wanted to change the spacing on them, so I did take them off again. But yeah, I just attached them onto a little piece of the yellow that was left over, and then I cut a diagonal line just for a bit of interest on the end of the banner there, and to tie in the green peel off I just run a little bit across that diagonal edge and trim the edges off. And now using some foam squares, which I trimmed down to make sure are the right size, I pop those onto the card front towards the bottom on the right hand side. And now here, to make sure that I get this straight, because again, like, it's double-sided sellotape isn't particularly forgiving, I mount this into the centre of the card. Now I realise I've done it a bit crooked, and this is the joy of this technique, because you've only got the little corners that have got the adhesive available to cling. You can peel it back up without too much issue, and then you just pull the little tabs out, and then I run a couple of peel-offs along the top and the bottom of the pattern paper, and then I go over all of the wood veneers in glossy accents. I did 2 coats of this to make them super shiny, and that is the end of that card. So now we're going to be moving on to card 5. So here, these are the little stamped doodles. I think these are so very cute, the little girl and boy, and I use Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink because I'm going to do some Copic colouring. The white cardstock, incidentally, in this kit is Copic friendly, so you can do your ink blending on it. So, having stamped those, I've left the majority of the colouring in of the little girl so that you can see what I do. Now, I am no great colourist. I enjoy it, and with these images, because they're quite small, I did only use 2 colours to blend. I just fill in the whole of the area in the paler shade, and then I drop the darker colour around where the shadows would be, like in this case on the dress on either side, and on the shoes I just put a little bit of the darkness at the bottom, and then I go back in with the paler colour on top and completely blend it out. So as I say, because these are just nice small little areas, you can get away with being a little bit sketchy, and because they're doodly images as well, they're not expected to be perfect, and I'm sticking with that. That's my excuse, and I'm holding it. So she has a little purple dress and shoes, and she's a little blondie. And these stamps with the hair, the place to put the darker colour is where the lines are on the stamps, because that's where the darker shade would be. I mean, these will look great without any fancy shading, and they will work with any kind of pens, but I did the little boy with brown hair, grey shorts and orange shoes and t-shirt. And then I just used, again, 2 shades of skin colour, if you like. I will list all of the colours that I used in my blog post, which will be available to view in the shop now. But yeah, and then I dropped a little bit of pink on the cheeks, and that's my grand Copic colouring tutorial, if you like. And I did bleach out the rosy cheeks a little bit with the skin tone again, and then I fussy cut them out, leaving a little border. And this was my idea when I saw these tags. I just trimmed off the loop at the top, and then in a pencil I kind of roughly put ABC. I am no fantastic letterist, so please don't judge me too harshly. I just wrote ABC with my chalk pen, and then I thickened the downward lines on all the letters. So it's a bit of a cheap way of doing it, because this is a bullet tip pen, so it's not a brush, it won't smush down. I'm sure that's not a technical word, but I hope you know what I mean. And here, this is my card base. I've gone for a green one, and I've taken the book stamp from the stamp set, and using my Versamark ink pad, I've just sort of twisted and turned to create a bit of background. I've popped some foam squares onto the back of what is my little chalkboard, and was just trying to choose the orientation. And then now I want these little guys to be holding some of these crayons. Now obviously they're a little bit larger than life for these little doodles, but they've got nice little words on them. And I chose Genius for the little boy and Dreamer for the little girl. And I used some foam squares just on the bits that weren't flush for them. And then at this point I decided, well, I've used my Spectrum Noir Sparkle pen, so it's in my additional products, I may as well make the most of it. So I coloured in all the books just to give the background a little bit of shine, and then I attach my little boy and girl onto the front of the card, and using foam squares. And I used a little bit of glossy accents to attach the crayons in their hands, as if they'd been writing the ABC. So really good for like a back to school card or a starting school card. That was the idea anyway. So yes, foam squares where the little people didn't touch the chalkboard, and where they did, I used a bit of glossy accents to attach it onto the chalkboard because I didn't want them to fall off. And that's the end of that card. So now we're on to card 6, and I'm not sure if this is my favourite, but this was a new one for me, so I was really pleased with how it turned out. But what I did was I took the second grey card base, and then using my pencil I've marked on to cut out a piece of the starry paper, and then I used a circle die, the circle die that I'd used earlier on, and then the size smaller as well, and die cut the front pattern paper. On the smaller circle I've just Versamarked to heat emboss my sentiments, and I used some Nouveau silver embossing powder for this, and it's Dream Big little one, and you couldn't really see it, there wasn't enough pop, so I grabbed my Hickory Smoke Distress ink and the blending tool, and I just went over the top just to sort of make the sentiment stick out a bit more, if you like. And because I had it out, I also went around the edges of the panel that I was making. I do use quite a few additional tools in this, tools and products in this video. I hope that doesn't irk too many people. They're quite standard things, I'd like to think. Anyway, right, so here's me showing you how much I love my scraps. I've stamped the little rocket, and then using 2 grey Copics, the same ones that I used on the little boy, I colour the starship in completely, and then I'm using the darker colour, I colour in sort of the bands, and then drop some shade around the edges, and then go back in with the paler of the 2 greys, just to soften out the dark edges that I've put in for some shadow. Again, I apologise, I'm no great colourist, but it turned out okay as far as I'm concerned, I hope. So Then this I fussy cut, but I didn't leave a white border like I did with the little boy and girl. I just cut along the black edges where the ink had been. Oh, and also to mention, I used Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink again because it's Copic friendly. So yes, here you see me snipping it out right along the line, and then I use my Black Soot Distress marker just to go around the edges, and I always hold the coloured side away from the pen in case the pen jumps off, and then it only will mark the back, no one will know. And then I use thin strips of foam. I double them up so that they've got double the thickness, and I use my anti-static powder tool around the edges to make sure that there's no stick there. And then, having taken away the sort of the thin frame that I created when cutting with 2 dies, I've put foam all around the the circle and the outer part. And here I've just taken a scrap out of my scrap bin of card, and I've cut some little snips. You can use anything on the back because it's not going to be shown. But here I've removed the backing from the foam squares onto the large panel. I'm now removing the backing from the little rockets, and then I'm laying my little pieces in. Now those little strips need to be wider than the frame that you've cut, and then I tuck the little card pieces under the outer frame. I must also say, make sure that when you put your foam squares onto the backing circle and the backing card bit, that they're not right to the edge, so that your rocket can do the little spin that I've just done. And that was my little jazz hands because I was very happy that it worked out. I cut some of the stars from the trim and I've attached those around, and then I used a couple of the small gems to cover up the windows on the rocket, and that's that card done. And I'm really, really pleased that that worked out first time round. Okay, card 7. So here I'm using almost all of the remainder of the starry paper, and I just cut it to be the same size as my card front, the same width. So I'm using all of the width that was available, if you like, and then just trim off any extra that was hanging over the edge. And then I take the blue patterns paper from the kit and marked on there how big it is. Now this you can do if you want, but I just drew some like wave patterns, so some like a scallop. As it happens, I didn't really follow it at all. I just used my scissors and sort of like rocked them back and forth to create an uneven wave. You can get dies that also do this, but I just wanted to show you it is really nice and straightforward to do without a die. And then here you'll see I use the top and the bottom of my blade so that I can get the wide piece of paper up against the edge. And here I'm using my Distress ink in Broken China because it was a good match to the patterned paper, and I've just sort of ink blended along the waves just to give them a little bit more definition. Put double-sided tape all over the back of the panel, and I've wrapped some ribbon in to the double-sided tape, and then I attach this onto the front of the card. And now this is using, it's almost black specialty pearlescent card. I stamp my little ship and then emboss that in silver, and then I also heat emboss the sentiment, which is let your dreams set sail. Then I cut those out. I fussy cut the ship, and then I just sort of trimmed the sentiment down. I cut 3 of the pom-poms off of the trim, and then using glossy accents attached them as if they were little like puffs of smoke, if you like, coming from an old-fashioned steam train. Boat even, rather than train. Sorry, Carson got a steam train for Christmas, and we've had nothing but it so far. Here you just see me randomly dotting around some glossy accents, and now I've emptied out my sequin mix into a coffee filter because it's so much easier to do that when you're picking out individual sequins. And at the top of the card I've used the star sequins and then the grey and the iridescent. At the bottom I've used the silver and the blue. And then here you're seeing me, because there was a little bit extra on the sentiment, really I should have fishtailed it. If I'd have thought about it I would have trimmed it down a bit further, but what I've done instead is made some layers up of sequins just by putting glossy accents down and then just sticking smaller sequins on top. You'll be able to see this better in the still shot at the end, but this is just another way of creating something a little bit special, and it ties in the sequins that I've sprayed along the front of the card as well. So that is this card also completed. Okay, now this card 8, this was a little bit of a risk. I was trying something a little bit different. I've chosen the C from the wood veneer alphabet, and I'm using my chameleon pen, not as intended, but merely as an alcohol pen, just to colour, and I went all around the front and then all around the edges as well, so that there wasn't any wood showing. Then using glossy accents, I've stuck it onto the centre of the circle that I cut from a previous card. And then I picked out a few Nuvo drops, and the one obviously from the kit, and a few others from previous kits or add-on recommendations. And I just sort of go dotting around because I want to cover the majority of the front of this C. So I started off with one colour and then sort of filled in some gaps, and then I filled in a few more. And when I got to the end, I wanted to put something a bit sparkly in there, so I actually put in the, I believe it's called Orange Fizz. I'll just check that. No, orange soda, sorry. And then I set that off to one side to dry. And then I've put some double-sided sellotape onto the remainder of the yellow striped patterns paper, and I position that onto the front of my card base. Trim off the extra that's hanging over. And now I've also taken from another one of the patterned papers, there's like a rainbow stripe, but there is yellow, orange, and it's not quite red, but like a deeper orange colour. And I've placed that in the middle. I run a couple of green peel-offs just to give a pop of extra colour, a bit more zesty. It's quite a citrus looking card. And I run those along either side in a wider width, and then I use the narrow ones on either side of the little centrepiece that I'd stuck on there. Then I chose one of the stickers, which, I mean, in case you guys didn't know, but Piggy actually does have a name, and it is Carson. And the sticker that worked so very well for this card is My Joy. So, and it was the right colour as well, so it all worked out very well. But I trimmed the sticker down, and then I used the remnant from another card and layered the die up so that it would be the right size. And then I stuck it on there, and then I foam mounted them both up. And then because I've used the Spectrum Noir pen, I just went around the grey just to give it a little bit of sparkle, because I don't think my little pig really fancy having sequins on a card. So there we go. That's card 8. So card 9 now. This is using some of the specialty cardstock, so it did actually leave me with a spare card base, which was nice. But this is the one that I sneak peeked in my Facebook group. If you're in the Facebook group, when I finished making the cards, I sneaked and said it's coming, because this is a little bit later than normal because of Christmas, and I have quite a large family, so to see everybody, we've had to spread it out over quite a few days. But right, so I've cut the silver pearlescent specialty cardstock down, and then I've used a rounded corner die and cut a little window out of that panel, and then I've stuck one of the little vellum pieces behind it using double-sided sellotape so that you don't see any glue. And then this is me using some of the rest of the specialty pink marbled cardstock, and I just cut some little strips with my trimmer, used some glossy accents to adhere them down, and using the lines on my grid mat, I made sure the first one was straight, and then after managing to get glossy accents all over the place, I lined the other two up so that they had sort of a similar gap. And then here I'm making a frame, so I use the same size die and the larger one for the window, cut that out, and then I used the ladybug die and I cut that one out of pink, and then I also used some of my black glitter cardstock. And here you'll see me putting some double-sided sellotape on the back of the black ladybird, and then I put all of the little pieces back in so that the black spots are in the right place. I use the pink blobs for the eyes rather than the black, and then if you're a bit squeamish you might want to look away, because I'm cutting the legs and the head off of the pink ladybird now so that I can stick the wings over the top. I use glossy accents because the glitter cardstock doesn't really appreciate having things stuck to it, and glossy accents gives a really good hold. And then I put some foam adhesive on the back of the little ladybird, and then put it as if it's like flying towards the flowers, I suppose. And then using one of the larger gems for the centre of one of the flowers, and then the smaller gems for the more tulip looking flower, like the stamen. And then for the sentiment, I use Dream Big Little One using VersaFine. Now this didn't dry, so with hindsight I would have heat embossed it. It hasn't smudged yet, but it's still wet and it's on my desk, and I'm looking at it thinking about how I'm going to fix that on there. But I love the intensity that you get from the VersaFine. Okay, last card. This one I've used one of the cut aparts. I just wanted to take the sentiment from it, which is May Your Dreams Take Flight, and I used one of those little stitched dies again that I've used previously, and this is one of the card base that I had left over. So I've cut the back off of it, and then I've just trimmed a little bit down on either side to make it fit onto the green card base which is remaining. And there's a lot of die cutting in this card, so if you're not a fan of die cutting, then this may not be the one for you. But I used the balloon die, and then I sort of neutralised some washi tape a little bit, and then I just die cut a whole bunch of balloons out of the front of this panel around where I intend to put the sentiment. I do make sure to put some to go off the edge of the card so that it looks a little bit more organic, like they are all flying upwards and onwards. And I keep all of the little pieces, particularly the little sort of sun reflections. They're the important parts for what I want to do, because I'm going to paper piece this die, which is one of my favourite looks. I really do like how it looks. Okay, so I've die cut one balloon from Silver Mirror, and then I've die cut the rest from the remainder of the blue cardstock. And here you'll see me just covering the whole back in double-sided sellotape, and then this is the fun bit when the actual panel starts to take shape. I put the silver balloon in the middle one, and then I put the blue balloons all around and filling in all of the gaps. And then I use the little reflections. I put the magnolia colour back in, and then I trim off all the balloons that are hanging over, although it did actually look quite good with, with them going off the edge. So it's a different look if you've got a bigger envelope. And then I attached the sentiment using some foam tape. I add a little bit more sellotape onto the back, remove the backing, position that into the front of my card panel, and then again for a bit of sparkle, pop on some Spectrum Noir. So leftovers, I've got all of the cut aparts apart from two. I've only used two of the vellum pieces. I've used maybe 3 stickers and then some of the letters. I've still got plenty of pink left, grey, a bit of silver, and then I've got the back of that card base. I've got loads of peel-offs, and then I've got all these sort of little bits and pieces which I really probably should put in the bin, but I love keeping scraps and using them all up. And then I've got 5 whole sheets I haven't even touched of the pattern papers. I've got my chameleon pen, which obviously is a keepie, as the stamp set is. I haven't even used a third of the gems. There's 1 tag left, still plenty of sequins to make at least 2 shakers. I've got my dies. I've got lots of wood veneers left. I've got the whole alphabet apart from C. There are other bits which you'll see me flash over as I find them on my desk, but these are the additional bits. So trimmers, Misty, oh, there was my Nouveau drops from the kit. That was a bit lost. Double-sided tapes, extra Nouveau, my Spectrum Noir tweezers, 4 dies. I've got the 2 distress inks, glossy accents, my chalk pen, my distress marker, then there's like a pencil, my pokey tool, some acrylic blocks, scissors, so quite general bits, and then some Copic markers. So they are the additional tools, or some inks, VersaFine, Versamark, Intense Black by Simon Says Stamp, and my T-square ruler. Oh, and then there's all the ribbons. That's the final parts of the kit that I forgot to add in there, and my ink blending tool and my stamp chamois. So there's obviously the big shot I also used in my Xyron machine. But anyway, here are the still shots of the cards. I hope you've enjoyed this kit. It was a really bright and cheerful one to play with, and I really did enjoy it. It was lovely, especially over Christmas, after all the Christmas themed cards. The design team have got their kits. Some of them did get caught in the Christmas post, unfortunately, but as they're getting, they are working on them, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they make. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll be back again very soon with another video with a release. And do let me know which is your favourite card. Thanks for sticking with me until this time, and until next time, do take care and happy paper crafting. Thank you. Bye.